Hi! In this tutorial, we'll be looking at how to draw a nose. If you've watched our previous videos, you will know we've looked at how to draw an eye and our brows. And today's lesson, we're going to learn some really clever tricks for drawing one of the most challenging parts of the face. If you would like our step-by-step guide for how to draw a nose, you can click on the link in the descriptions below. If you haven't watched the other videos in our series on how to draw a face, you will find the links to how to draw an eye and how to draw an eyebrow in the description below. For this tutorial, all you will need is a piece of paper, a pencil, I'm using a 4B, but any pencil is fine, and an eraser. Let's get started. So your nose is exactly the same width as your eyes, and the average nose and average eye is about 2.5 centimeters wide. So if you are wanting to draw a face, you can use those measurements. To start a nose, all you need to do is draw 3 circles. And depending on where you put those 3 circles, you can draw a different kind of nose. So in this tutorial, we will look at 3 distinctive types of noses and how to draw them. Now, noses come in all shapes and sizes. We're going to start with a large nose. So what we want to do is plan out our picture. I'm just going to draw a nice big oval, and that's going to be the center of my nose. Now I'm going to be drawing a nose that's got quite a high point and that is wide. So I'm going to draw my second 2 circles, and these 2 circles are going to represent the nostrils. They're going to be slightly lower down. So a little bit lower than the large circle that I've drawn in the middle. An important thing to get right when you're drawing a nose is making sure that these 2 circles are the same size and the same height. So I'm just going to use my eraser because it's what I have in front of me and mark off, okay, the bottom of my circle needs to be there, the top of my circle needs to be there. So I have these 2 reference points when I'm drawing my second circle. I have a much better chance of getting them to be the same size. Okay. They should overlap, these 3 circles. So we've got our main circle that forms parts of the bridge of our nose, and our 2 smaller circles. Does not matter what kind of nose you're drawing, they should always overlap. Some of them will overlap more than others. Now that we have these 3 circles, we can use them as a guide for drawing our nostrils and the tip of our nose. So I'm not going to outline this whole circle, but probably about halfway through the circle, I'm going to draw a nice line that curves around and ends just before it reaches the middle circle. And on the other side, we're going to do that as well, about halfway. Add the line in and stop just short of this large circle. Now this large circle is going to be the tip of our nose, so we're going to draw a slightly darker line around the tip of our nose. Right, so we've done the tip of our nose here, and now we're going to do the curve of the nostrils. Be aware not to go into the top half of your circle, so you need to stay in the bottom half of your circle. Just curve your line up and drop it down. Curve your line up and drop it down. Okay, as I'm looking at this, I feel like I could even rub out a little bit more of this outside circle. You don't want these 2 lines to overlap too much. Okay, now this forms the base of our nose, and we are again going to use the shapes of the circles to help us shade in our nose. So around the edges of our nostrils, we're going to have some dark shading. And right on this bottom tip here, we'll also have some dark shading. So I'm just following the lines that I've drawn and adding a little bit of shading to them. Now at this point here, I'm making the darker side of my nose the left, so that means that my light is coming from the right hand side. There's my other sun. So I'm going to make a darker shading on the opposite side. And I'm just going to use the circular shape to add a little bit of shading to the nose. we don't want to have 2 full circles shaded into our nose, so just be very careful about the amount of shading you add here. Okay, and you're going to add slightly less shading on the other side because this is where our light is coming from. Okay, and now we're going to move on to the bridge of our nose. Now, usually people like to just draw 2 lines down to show the bridge of the nose, but actually you need to just do a little bit of gentle shading. My motto is always press light until it's right. So do some really light shading, just going straight up. And on the left-hand side, we're going to make it slightly darker. So I'm doing it really lightly and slowly building it to make it darker and darker, so that I don't make a mistake. You don't want to go in too dark and then be trying to soften it and shade it out. If you would like to make the shading look a little softer, you can just take your finger and rub over it, and it makes for much gentler shading. Okay, this point here at the tip of the nose is going to be a light point, so you don't want to have too much shading in that spot. And you're just going to slowly build up the shading. If your eyes were in the picture, you would be working into your eye over here. I'm just going to draw a basic eye, and your eyebrow would be up there. You would work this shading into the eye, so you would just take it up there and rub it into the eye, but we'll be looking at that in a later video. So the only solid lines that you have on a nose would be for the tip of the nose, and this is of course for the front view of the nose. If you were looking at the nose from the side, you would draw the bridge with a straight hard line. Right, so that's our first nose. Let's have a look at our second nose. Now, in this last nose, we did quite a big circle in the middle. And for the second one, we're going to make a slightly smaller circle. And I'm going to make it a little bit more rounded. So my last one was more of an oval. And this one's going to have a circular shape. And the 2 smaller circles that are on either side, I'm going to make them slightly higher up in the circle. So maybe the middle of the circle. So roughly halfway through the circle is my marker for drawing my 2 nostrils. Okay, again, take the time to make sure that they're even and at the same height. Okay, now again, we're going to start with our darker outline around the bottom. So I'm just going to start a little bit shy of halfway, and I'm going to go around the edge of the circle and then curve down to the middle circle, and curve up again. And now we've got a nice nose shape. Right, we've got the outline for our nose now. Again, I'm going to make the sun come from the right hand side, which means I would have much darker shading on the left. And we're just going to do some shading around the nostrils. Now, in the same way that the size and position of the circles changes a nose shape, the amount of shading would also change it. So the darker you make it, the more it will look set back. So if I do a lot of dark shading on this bottom circle here, it's going to make the nose look a bit bigger. Okay, again, in this point where the circles meet, there'll be a little bit of darker shading. That's the point where the nostrils come into your nose. Okay, and here I'm adding a lot more dark shading to my nose. So by adding more shading to this side, it makes it look like this nostril, or the tip of your nose, is standing up a little bit more. So because I did less shading on the first nose, it looks flatter. More dark shading will make the nose look like it's more pronounced or standing out more, because it's casting more of a shadow on the other side. So the amount of shading also changes the shape of your nose. Okay, then again we can go up If you draw the shading on the side of your nose closer together, it will make the person look like they have a really narrow bridge of their nose. The further apart your shading is, then they have a wider bridge. And then of course the darker you make this shading, it will look like the person's nose is sticking out more. But then the lighter you make the shading, the flatter their nose looks. So the way that you shade a nose can make it look very different. Okay, I'm just rubbing this. I've gone a bit skew at the top, so I'm just going to correct that with my razor. You can also come with your razor and lighten certain spots. You do need to make sure you keep a little bit of light on this left nostril. Even though we want it to be darker, it's still going to have some light on it. Right, so we're going to shade the bridge of the nose now. Nice light shading. And just going to rub it. Because our light is coming from the left hand side, just do a little bit more shading on the light. And in the same way as we spoke about in the previous nose, this shading would go up into the eyebrow and into the eye, so you would merge it all together. You can smooth off your shading for a softer, smoother looking skin, or if you are drawing an older, wrinkly person, then you can leave it as cross-hatching, and it creates a texture that would make someone think of an old, wrinkly face. So the style of shading you use would really depend on how you want your picture to turn out. You can also add a little bit of shading below the nose, but we will look at that in our next video about drawing a mouth. So I'm not going to do too much of the shading below the nose for now. Okay, we're going to make a button nose finally. So we're going to make quite a small circle in the middle and smaller circles around the outside that are quite close in, so we're not going to make our nostrils stick out too much. Okay, if you draw your outline around the edge, and again use your circles to shade it in. In this nose, I've added a little bit too much dark shading, so I'm just taking my eraser, pulling back some of that shading. You can see in the previous two noses, I did dark shading along the bottom of the nose, and for this one, I've left it quite light, and that makes the nose look more pointed. So I'm moving my shading up a little bit on the nose to make a more pointy nose. And that is how you draw a nose. If you have any questions about how to draw a nose, please leave them in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, and if you're new to our channel, consider subscribing. We upload new videos every week. If you've been enjoying our series on how to draw a face, please join us for our next video on how to draw a mouth.